Okay, everyone, quick cold open because we totally forgot to do this while we were recording the old episode. But we need to do our keep, revise, delete of the past group of episodes that we've just done.
Yes, and of course, one of those 4 episodes was an interview, so I don't think we should count that one. So maybe we just have 3 for this time. So we'll have to think of which one which category we don't want to do, because it's usually keep, revise, giveaway, delete. So maybe the revision one? Which one do we, or giveaway? Which one do we not want to do?
Well, maybe we can each choose. Like, maybe they'll fall into like specific categories and we'll just know. You know what I mean?
Okay. So our 3 that we're working with is the Santa Claus episode, or Will the Real Santa Claus from the 70s show. There's also Secret of the Whispering Walls from the 70s show, and then The Ballad of Robin Hood from the 95 show.
Oh, no. Okay. I'm keeping Will the Real Santa Claus. It was a perfect episode of TV.
Don't change it. Don't touch it.
No. Keep, revise, delete, giveaway. Revise, delete, or giveaway.
Ooh, I want to revise Robin Hood because you and I had a lot of ideas on how we would expand that.
You're right.
And turn it into like a little 45-minute episode.
I agree. And then I think I would give away Secret of Whispering Walls.
Yeah.
Honestly, I'd give away or delete it. I don't think it was that great. I think there were many other episodes of the 77 show that were way better. So it's I don't really care either way. To be nicer, I'll say giveaway.
Yeah, I don't want to delete it. And I mean, again, I always enjoy a good Hidden Staircase adaptation, but it seems more like somebody else's ideal Hidden Staircase than it would be my ideal Hidden Staircase. So that works.
Yeah. Okay. So keep Will the Real Santa Claus, give away Secret of the Whispering Walls, and revise The Ballad of Robin Hood. That feels right.
It. Yeah.
That feels right.
That was easier than I thought it was going to be.
It was. Oh, and also, regular Drews, in honor of Valentine's Day, we are hosting a giveaway over on our Instagram page. Head over there to get a chance to snag one of 2 Nancy Drew games that we love, The Secret of Shadow Ranch or Warnings at Waverly Academy. If you win, you'll get a code for a free download of the game for yourself, or you can give it away to someone you love. And even if you don't win, regular Drews, never fear, because Her Interactive is also holding a Valentine's Day contest of their own and a sale for 30% off of all of their games when you use the code LOVEMYSTERY26 at checkout. That's LOVEMYSTERY26. Head over to our Instagram page at regular Nancy Drew or at Nancy Drew PC Games to learn more.
Well, aren't you a regular Nancy Drew?
I'll learn that from the Nancy Drew detective.
Okay, go.
You think you can follow the clues and solve the case of the missing condiment, Nancy Drew?
You guys have read every Nancy Drew mystery ever written.
Nancy, please tell me you're joking.
Wow, you suck at this Nancy Drew stuff. You should get a new hobby.
My name is Carson Drew, and this is my assistant, Nancy.
Nancy Drew.
It's curtains for you, Miss Drew.
Nancy Drew strikes again.
A regular Nancy Drew.
Well, hello, regular Drews.
Hello, everyone.
We are back with a very special episode. It is another history of episode. Yes. Kori, what are we talking about today?
Today, we are going to do a little bit of a different history episode than normal. It's the history of Nancy Drew fans. I'm so excited about this. So, just the history of what the fandom has been up to since 1930.
Spoiler alert, a lot.
A lot. There's more than you might realize.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Oh my gosh, where do I even start? Okay.
Should we just jump right in?
Let me credit our sources really quickly here.
Great.
One major book that I read that was really, really helpful in putting this information together was a book called Rediscovering Nancy Drew, which this is going to be something we'll talk about a lot later on in the episode. But in 1993, there was a Nancy Drew conference held. And then this book, it was edited by Carolyn Stewart Dyer and Nancy Tillman Romalov, who were both the organizers of this conference. But this book is like a collection of writings from all the people who presented at that conference. Cool. So it's almost the conference in book form. So there's a ton of contributors to this book. I won't list all the actual authors off here, but this was really, really helpful in doing that. So a lot of really great information there. Of course, the book Girl Sleuth by Melanie Rehak is one that we really love as well. We reference that one a lot. Jen Fisher, our
obviously queen.
Yes, our queen, our role model, who we absolutely love. We've talked to her a lot. We've talked about her a lot. So she was really helpful in this. Geoffrey Lapin is another name that if you don't know his name already, you will know his name by the end of this episode. And then as well, James Keeline, who has the website stratemeyer.org. He has a ton of really great information. And then the University of Iowa's libraries and the New York Public Library, their resources were really helpful in this as well.
My God.
I'm so excited. So, as normal, we'll just start with a very brief history of Nancy Drew, because a lot of this, if you don't know like the basics of the history, this will be relevant later. So do you want to run us through these bullet points here real quick?
Yes, of course. So we've talked a lot about this history before, and we have several history of episodes kind of about this. So if you have more questions about this, definitely go back and listen to those other episodes. You can find those lists on our website, regularnancydrew.com, if you're interested. But yes, to just summarize kind of briefly. So in 1905, Edward Stratemeyer founded the Stratemeyer Syndicate, and this is kind of the first company to exclusively produce children's books at the time. They published the Dana Girls, the Bobbsey Twins, the Hardy Boys, Tom Swift, and all of this using ghostwriters, which was a pretty common practice for the dime novel industry at the time. But then after kind of realizing this potential market for a series just for girls, Edward Stratemeyer then pitched his idea for Nancy Drew to Grosset and Dunlap. And then he contracted, of course, our girl, Mildred Wirt Benson, to write as Carolyn Keene for those first novels. And those first 3 books were published on April 28th in 1930. Yeah, and Mildred wrote 23 of those first 30 Nancy Drew books. But of course, as we know, Edward Stratemeyer actually passed away just 10 days after the initial copyright date of those first 3 books. And so he never really got to see, the fame of Nancy Drew. And his daughters, Harriet and Edna, took over the Stratemeyer Syndicate after his passing. And they started writing these outlines for these books that Edward Stratemeyer previously wrote. And they kept up with the same practice of hiring ghostwriters to actually write these books. And then in 1959, the Syndicate took on the task of revising and re-releasing the existing books for many of the Syndicate series to just remove prejudice and racial stereotyping. And as a result, the first 34 Nancy Drew books have both an original text version and a revised text version. And obviously, we have talked a lot about kind of the differences between those in our past episodes about a lot of the mystery stories. And they kept on writing other books as well, and so the series continued. And Harriet Stratemeyer is actually credited as being the sole Carolyn Keene for books 33 onward. And then in 1979, the Syndicate actually changed publishers from Grosset and Dunlap to Simon & Schuster, which ended officially the original 56 Mystery Stories series. And there was actually that huge court case that happened between Grosset and Dunlap and Simon & Schuster to kind of settle the publishing rights for those first 56 books. And that lawsuit actually resulted in Mildred Wirt Benson's role as a ghostwriter being revealed kind of to the public for the first time, which was a huge thing. And we're going to talk about that.
Of course.
And then after Harriet passed in 1982, the Syndicate was sold to Simon & Schuster, who later introduced new series like the Nancy Drew Files, Nancy Drew Girl Detective, and the Nancy Drew Diaries, which we also love.
Yes. So, and lots more. Yes.
And lots more. So that's just a brief overview.
Yes. So I've come up with a little something here that I call our generational model. So Nancy is about of course, we know she's about to celebrate her 96th birthday, and her character has seen some really important changes in that time. And also, of course, there's been a lot of changes in the world that would possibly impact, fandoms and the lives of Nancy Drew's fans, obviously. So to help better understand the history of the fans, I think that it's important to look at our history in the context of Nancy's history, and break it down a little bit into like subgroups. So to help break this down, I've developed this generational model that honestly sounds a little bit insane, but hopefully will help to guide our discussion of the fans.
I love it. I think it's great.
Yay. Oh, good. Oh, I'm so glad, because it feels a little bit out of left field. I wasn't sure how accurate other people might think that it is, but I'm glad that you think so.
Mm-hmm.
So this generational model, if you're already familiar with the big one that most people are familiar with, like boomers, Gen X, millennials, Gen Z.
Right.
This is very similar to that in concept, except my model bases it on when you first became a Nancy Drew fan and not necessarily the year that you were born in. Obviously, anyone can be a Nancy Drew fan at any age. You can discover Nancy Drew at any age. So don't feel like you have to have been born in a certain year in order to belong to a certain fan group. Also, obviously, each fan group, you're not just a fan in the time that you discovered her. You're still a fan today, most likely. I mean, you don't have to be, but, don't feel like it's boxing anyone in or anything like that. It's not to limit. It's just to help describe what Nancy Drew might have been like at the time that you first discovered her.
Exactly.
So using this model, we're going to attempt to address several questions today. What was it like being a fan in a given time period? How did fans from that time period become introduced to Nancy? What was Nancy herself like in that time period? What was the fan community like? And how did fans get to know each other, interact with each other? How do our major Nancy Drew producers, like the Simon & Schuster, Stratemeyer Syndicate, Her Interactive, Warner Brothers, all those companies, how did they interact with fans? And then how was each group influenced by the time period in which they lived or the time in which they first discovered Nancy? And how were they influenced by previous generations of fans?
Big questions.
Yes. So in developing this model, I identified 5 major points of change in Nancy's history and used that to determine where a certain group would start and end. And just, again, the idea being that anyone who became a fan within that time frame should have basically a similar idea about who Nancy's character should be, or what her character actually is and what that looks like. And so, of course, these groups, just like with Gen Z or millennials or whatever, the groups are really large. Some of these groups are like 30 years long. So obviously your childhood was not 30 years long. You weren't a fan, or, you weren't maybe discovering Nancy Drew for this entire amount of time. But, if you became a fan in 1930, hopefully your idea of what Nancy should look like would also be similar to people in 1958, because there weren't a lot of changes to Nancy in that time, even though obviously in the world, in real life, that is a long time. So hopefully I explained that well enough.
Yes.
So these 5 groups are, and I've named these, I tried to use names that are already pretty common within the fandom, but the groups are the Collectors, which is from 1930 to 1958. So that spans from when Nancy Drew was first published, that first introduction in 1930, all the way up until right before the revisions started.
Mm-hmm.
The next group is the Sleuths. So this is from 1959 to 1979. So that's going to go from when the revised text first started until the switch from Grosset and Dunlap to Simon & Schuster. Next is the Nancy Drew Hardy Boys fans. So this is from 1980 to 1997. And that goes from when we first switched to Simon & Schuster until the end of the Files and Super Mystery series. Our group, the one that we belong to, is the Clue Crew. This goes from 1998 to 2015. Of course, that is from when the very first Nancy Drew game was published until Her Interactive started their hiatus. And then the most recent group is the Droots. This goes from 2016 to 2026. That is something that I have named in my mind. The Drew Drought is the start of this time period. And I promise I will go into what that means later, but I've named this time period the Drew Drought. And then that goes until Nancy Drew enters the public domain. And I have a feeling that this is going to start a new one. Yeah, because now that she's in the public domain, this future group is going to have a different idea, possibly, than all previous groups. So,
gosh, and who knows what that is going to look like and what that idea is going to be.
Oh my gosh, we could speculate all day long on what the public domain is going to be.
Oh my God.
All right, so let's start with the Collectors. So again, this is the group that was from 1930 to 1958. So, of course, this group grew up reading the original text. Obviously, that is all that existed at the time. So that's obviously the only options that they had.
Obviously, the Benita Granville movies were in theaters in this time period as well, so they might have seen those. They may think that depiction, Benita's depiction of Nancy, is maybe the most faithful depiction of her character.
I think that this is actually the inspiration for this episode almost. Because I often see arguments like Pamela Sue Martin was the best. No, Benita Granville was the most accurate representation. No, Kennedy McMahon was. I see all these arguments and it made me think why? Why is that?
Yeah.
And it's because we all have different ideas of what Nancy's character should look like. She has changed a lot more in her 96 years so far than a lot of people might realize. And so I think that was very interesting. So yeah, of course, if you only ever read the original text, and if that's all that existed when these movies were made, then of course, that's going to be the most accurate representation. So people from this group are probably going to like Benita's representation the best.
And it's interesting too, because it's not right. It's not like anyone is wrong or anyone is right.
Of course.
Because it's just different, But, and we all still, of course, have our opinions. But I think, it's interesting to think, well, how our experiences shaped our opinions. And not the other way around necessarily. So, yeah,
truly, any group could say that the Nancy that was their movie or TV Nancy at the time is the most accurate representation, and they'd be right about their own group.
Right. I still stand by Maggie Lawson.
Oh my gosh.
In the Walt Disney TV movie, Nancy Drew, On Campus or whatever.
It's just called Nancy Drew.
No, it's just called Nancy Drew. Yeah. But she's in college in that one. I still think that's correct.
Yes. Oh, I love the Maggie Lawson movie. And you know why that is? Because we're millennials. Because that movie was made specifically for us.
Yes, it was. It was.
So I imagine, if somebody from this collector group saw the Maggie Lawson movie, they might be like, oh, I like Benita Granville better,
Right. Yes. And no wonder, because it doesn't look anything like the 1930s Nancy.
Right. Yeah.
So, yeah.
And that's okay. And I should have put a quick disclaimer on this. Obviously, all of this, previous knowledge is just my research. Obviously, Becky and I were not alive back in the 1930s to know what the fandom looks back then. So yeah, just like with the generational model that we're all familiar with millennials or whatever, it's just going to be a generalization. It's not going to perfectly describe every fan's experience. Hopefully just kind of a more general thing, obviously. But yeah, of course, we don't know. A little bit of speculation is going into this here. So if we're completely wrong, let us know. But hopefully we're getting close.
Email us and yell at us. It's fine.
Yes.
It's fine.
So next year, we think that this group, at least at the beginning of the time period, may have been a slightly older audience. I'm a little frustrated with this particular detail here because I couldn't find a specific source on this. I found 2 or 3 sources that will state this, but then didn't give their source for it or didn't give any additional detail or explain why. And so it's not that I don't believe those sources. I just wanted more information.
Right.
And when I did spend quite a bit of time looking for more information, and ultimately I was not able to find anything that indicated why this was the case. But my own speculation is just that it would have been due to literacy rates at the time. And literacy rates actually really drastically improved throughout the 1930s. So possibly even by 1935, this may not have been the case any longer. But initially, we think that the syndicate was probably aiming for more of a 12 to 14-year-old audience. Today, it's more of the 8 to 12 range. And just because, obviously, Mildred Ward Benson's writing is a little bit more advanced than some of the revised texts were. So I think that it would be reasonable to say it was slightly older. And then as literacy rates improved, that age just kind of dropped pretty drastically in those first few years of the fandom.
I do think there's a fair bit of subtext in the original text versions that does not exist in the revised text. So that I could definitely see that.
Something that a 12 to 14-year-old might pick up on a little bit easier than an 8-year-old. Oh, and I decided to name this group the Collectors just because the members of this group have done so much extensive collecting and archival work that allows us to have knowledge of the franchise that we wouldn't have otherwise. Also, of course, given the time period here, some members of this group might have lived through one or even both world wars. And as we know, World War II in particular sparked, I wonder why, this movement, especially across the U.S., to try to keep more detailed records, to try to keep our archival materials, I guess, more organized. And of course, Nancy Drew records were no exception. There was a really, really extensive archival work done during this time period that we should be so grateful for today that it exists, because it allows us to know all the information that we have.
That's probably why that you and I are able to walk into the New York Public Library and look at all of the records from the Stratemeyer Syndicate is a lot due to these efforts. So
absolutely.
Yeah.
Do you want to take the next one then?
Sure. So this Nancy Drew of this group is probably picturing Nancy as younger, right? 16. She's 16 in the original text versions. Probably picturing her as a blonde. I still picture her as a blonde. Just want to know.
But
I think blonde hair. I think it's Maggie Lawson. Anyway.
Oh, that's so funny.
She's also feistier and underestimated by other people around her. That's just kind of how I think this group typifies their Nancy, right? That's the Nancy Drew of the original text versions. It's Mildred's style, right? Style of writing is writing a Nancy who is just more, what's a better word than feistier? A little more anti-establishment, anti-authoritarian, rebellious, perhaps, willing to take risks, go against the police in some circumstances, break the law sometimes. Whereas that's very different from even just the revised text, which will come up next.
So what did the fan experience actually look like during this time? Of course, you could just go out and buy these dime novels, obviously implied that they're just for sale on a lot of cheap newsstands or whatever. But a lot of fans in this time period might have had trouble actually getting their hands on books because they were banned from a lot of libraries in the U.S. And they were considered trash by a lot of teachers. And there was this movement to really?
Yeah, I didn't know this.
It went into a lot of detail about this in Rediscovering Nancy Drew, but there was a lot of movement from librarians to actually have this stuff removed from schools.
Wow.
Because they thought it was garbage. They called it literary junk food is the term that they gave it.
Wow.
And it's okay, what do you really want from kids here? It's just a fun story. I don't think that that's rotting their brains to let them read fun stories, but girls love Nancy Drew anyway, though, and she persevered despite this. And it was like us in middle school passing notes around. Girls would just pass their copies of Nancy Drew around to each other. And so if you weren't going out and buying it, at least you were getting it from your friend or whoever. And, we hear a lot of Nancy Drew stories on this podcast. And I love hearing people's Nancy Drew stories and how they first got introduced to Nancy Drew, or how they first discovered the book, or how they first came to own their first book, or whatever it might be. And I just love those stories so much. And for the longest time, I had this feeling that it was this tradition to pass Nancy Drew on to the next generation, just because we hear so many fans saying oh, my mom gave me her books, or my older cousin, or my grandmother, whoever, just some older woman. And I realized that wasn't the case for this group, obviously, because there was no previous group for them to have been passed down from. And obviously, again, this is a almost 30-year time frame here. So maybe the later members of this group might have had a mother or something that was also a fan right at the beginning and gave them their books. But for the most part, it was just having to discover it independently, or maybe your friend told you about it at school. And so that's how you became interested. But this group, of course, started that trend. They are the ones that would eventually pass those books on to their children and their grandchildren. And so they are the reason that Nancy Drew, or at least the start of the reason that Nancy Drew is still so popular today, just because they would pass Nancy on. And then, of course, all that archival work that they were doing, they made sure that she was preserved for future generations. But it just made me think about how being gifted your first Nancy Drew book feels like this almost sacred tradition, that it's this induction into this decades-long sisterhood of sleuths. And I think that the timing of the introduction is particularly important. You and I were both psychology majors. We've taken plenty of classes on human development. If you know anything about psychology and human development, you know that target age range, 8 to 12, is really, really crucial in terms of identity development and formation in your mind. And so if you're going through this time period of like trying to figure out who you are, it's so special to have your mom, your grandma, your teacher, just some older woman in your life recognize that in you of like, hey, I see that you are trying to figure out who you're going to be in life and who you want to be. Here's Nancy Drew. Take her with you. She'll help you where you're going, kind of a thing. Like,
that's special.
Obviously, it's not always that for everyone, but I think that does explain why Nancy Drew does tend to stay with people long after their childhood, is because that introduction happens at such a crucial point in your life. Of course, when you're trying to figure out who you are, if you see this aspirational figure, you're going to say, oh, I want to be like Nancy Drew. Oh, I identify as a Nancy Drew fan. And so it becomes kind of ingrained in you.
Yeah.
And how often do we hear from people, oh, I pursued XYZ career or XYZ major in college because Nancy Drew made me do it. Or I love XYZ hobby because Nancy Drew did it in one of her books, Yeah. And I just love it. It's just so heartwarming.
Yeah, absolutely. No, yeah, that's so true. Like when I started reading the Nancy Drew books, like, I mean, I gotta be honest, I think the mystery lover part of me existed for before Nancy Drew.
Of course it did.
I started with Blue's Clues, baby. You know what I mean? Like, I was in there solving mysteries from the rip.
Of course. Scooby-Doo, Harriet the Spy, all of these things like preceded Nancy. But Nancy was like the cherry on top almost,
Absolutely. Well, and then when you talk about like identity formation, it's like all of those things are great or whatever. But then to get to see Nancy as a young woman, kind of operating in our world, you know what I mean? Like, obviously it's a little bit fantastic in some of these situations or whatever, but like the situations she gets into are reminiscent of real life, you know what I mean? So we get to see her interacting with the police. We get to see her interacting with her friends and her community, and watching how Nancy carries herself and the choices that Nancy makes and the way that she, investigates, and the way she carries herself and has like this poise and grace about her, or coyness and cleverness and and obviously bravery and all of that stuff. It puts like this lens on mystery solving of like, well, it's not just solving the mystery that's important, right? It's how you solve the mystery that's important. Yes. It's the process of solving the mystery that's important, and how you represent yourself throughout life, and being kind and being brave and, standing up for the little people, or sometimes the rich people, as Nancy is wont to do. You know what I mean? There's criticism there. There's critique there too. But yeah, I think that's what makes Nancy Drew different for me as far as like identity formation goes. It's not just, oh, I love mysteries and I love getting to catch the bad guy or figure out who the bad guy is. No, Nancy Drew is about who you are, is about being the main character in your own life, in a way that I think other mysteries don't capture that. So anyway.
Yeah, there's loving Nancy Drew, but then there's also holding that identity as a Nancy Drew fan. And I think that they are a little bit separate. Obviously, it's all related to each other, but it's not just one thing. It's several things. So
yeah, exactly.
Oh, I love it so much. Do you want to take this Benita
Yes.
Granville part here? I love this.
This is honestly my favorite bit of lore, is this about the Benita Granville movies. Okay, but so obviously there were 4 Benita Granville movies, and fans in this time possibly got to see those movies in theaters. Obviously, they were wildly popular, and they actually stayed in theaters for years after their initial release. And that was the first time that any Stratemeyer Syndicate properties were adapted to film. So this was like a big deal. It was really new and really exciting.
How often does a book that you love get made into a movie less than 8 years later? That is so fast.
That's true. That is so fast.
Things.
Yeah. Obviously, Hollywood development was a lot different at the time. Just like technology and, just the process of making a movie looked a lot different. But yeah, that is fast. So to just think about like her rise in popularity was quick. Near overnight success. Like,
absolutely.
Yeah. But then in 1938, Warner Brothers created the Hollywood Nancy Drew Club to kind of promote these movies. And it seems that the Hollywood Club was more like the original or main chapter of the club. And then Warner Brothers like encouraged this club in like other movie theaters, like to have like their own local chapters in like different areas or whatever. And obviously Bonita Granville was named as the honorary president of all of these clubs. But they had rules.
This is so funny.
And these rules are wild, you guys. Okay, so number 1, you must have a steady boyfriend in the sense of a pal. What?
So
you
what
have
does that
to have
mean?
a boyfriend to be in the club?
But in the sense of a pal, I assume that this is a reference to the fact that, you know, Ted is like her buddy throughout the whole movie. Like there's never any Bess or George, obviously. Is that more platonic? Like, are we saying in the sense of a pal because we're not saying in the sense of a date? Like, what does that mean? Why include in the sense of a pal?
But they say steady boyfriend.
Right. That makes me think
feel
date.
I feel like you wouldn't say steady boyfriend. You'd just say boyfriend in the sense of a pal. But
is he platonic if he's a pal? Did pal mean something different?
Hold on.
I don't know why that's throwing me off so much.
Did pal mean in
1930s? Because otherwise they could have just left it as must have a steady boyfriend.
Yeah, I mean, it means the same thing.
Okay.
Originated from a word meaning brother. Slang for accomplice. Yeah, no, I don't know.
Weird?
I don't get it. It is weird. Anyway,
sorry.
Okay. Number 2 is take part in choosing own clothes.
Did girls not do that in the 30s?
I mean, I'm sure some girls couldn't do that, right? Like they just kind of had to wear whatever was chosen for them. But like, it just seems like such weird rules for a club. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, why? What
does that have to do with Nancy Drew?
Is it supposed to be rich? Like you're supposed to be like a level of wealthy, or like it's about putting yourself, like taking pride in like your appearance, or like maybe. Someone who was alive at this time really needs to hit us up and let us know what this meant, because I don't get it.
Yeah.
Okay, my favorite rule, number 3. No smoking, drinking, or petting. You guys.
Of course.
You guys.
Nancy would never.
Don't be a bad girl. You can't be a bad girl. Okay.
Oh my gosh.
4, and this one's interesting. Pay their share on dates with boys own age.
But not on dates with boys not your age. Just kidding.
Not with older boys. Older boys can pay. Younger boys can pay too. I think this is interesting. Because I think a lot of the times, I think this is probably actually really revolutionary for the time, I can only imagine. And I think maybe like these days, women would say something a lot different. Because like, yes, I mean, you know, we still like split lots of dates or, you know, whatever, like in this day and age, that's a common practice to do. But a lot of women feel today like, no, the person who asked the other person out on the date should pay. You know, they've offered this experience, they're required to pay. Or even like in the context of like, you know, heteronormative male-female relationships, no, the guy should pay because the guy probably has more money.
That's very common. Yeah.
And the woman has more like riding on the date. She's putting herself in more danger. She is probably going to greater lengths to buy clothes, wear makeup, you know, get dressed, do all of that, where the man kind of just has to show up. But I think at this time, obviously all of that stuff is still true, but because it's such a new thing, and I think probably there was a lot more social expectation on how the date went, that paying your own way was almost like a way to ensure your own safety, your own agency as a part of the date, to say like, no, actually, I don't owe you anything from this date. I paid my way here. You know what I mean? Like, I think there was just a lot more to that at this time. I just think that's really interesting. Anyway.
No, it definitely is.
5, take part in plans for own career. That's nice.
I like that. Yes.
Yeah. 6, must have at least one hobby. Okay.
I feel like that's easy. Yeah. Hopefully everyone has something they enjoy.
7 must participate in at least one extracurricular school activity.
Okay.
Okay. And 8 must be a high school student. So it's just all weird because, like, who's actually enforcing the rules of this club? Nobody. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it's like, so why are we choosing these things to be our rules for this club?
Yeah.
One asks oneself.
But although that last point there, that must be a high school student, that does give us another clue to the target age range around this time, because if high schoolers were, like 14 to 18-ish.
Yeah.
So yeah, maybe it was for slightly older, even as late as 1938, 39.
Yeah. You could also order a Nancy Drew detective badge or a photo of Bonita Granville for 30 cents, which is cute. But yeah, probably they didn't actually there weren't like meetings or like official chapters of this club. It was just kind of like a promotional thing. There might be like watch parties at theaters or things like that, but that's probably the extent of it. So yeah.
Alrighty. There were also a lot of promotional fan clubs that I found reference to throughout time. And these are both Grosset and Dunlap and Simon & Schuster introduced what they called book clubs for their Nancy Drew series at various points in time. These are not book clubs in the traditional sense of like we're sitting around discussing a book that we liked or, that kind of stuff. It's really more of a subscription style sales model that they would refer to as a book club. So of course, purchasing from these books don't really contribute to a sense of community like a book club might do. But it does absolutely. I think it's actually a really brilliant marketing strategy in terms of getting people to buy into that identity as a Nancy Drew fan. Because what these subscription models were is basically like you would pay however much a month, you would receive one book a month. Maybe it was the newest book, whatever. But then it would also come with like a little certificate that says like, I'm Nancy Drew's biggest fan, or like I'm in Nancy Drew's fan club, or later time periods might have like a t-shirt or something that would come with it. And so I think that it was really smart to have that as like a thing for fans to help promote that identity as an Nancy Drew fan.
Yeah.
So I don't think that these are like super, super interesting, but I've made a couple notes about what that might have looked like for each time period.
Yeah.
So in this time period, it was Nancy Drew's Inner Circle, which was, again, a book club that would send you like their little I Love Nancy Drew membership card. And then you would get like a new book every month or whatever.
Yeah. I'd join a Nancy Drew book club like that.
Absolutely.
That's fun. Yeah.
I would want to get a new book every month if I was, brand new to the series.
For sure.
So I think that that's really cute.
That's cute.
Again, not necessarily as relevant to the fandom, but maybe you belong to one of these groups or something at some point in time. So I would love to hear what that experience was like.
Oh my God. If you were in one of these groups and you have one of these little fan club cards, bring it to the next convention.
Oh yeah, that'd be so cute. Oh my gosh, that's fun.
See it so bad. Or post it on the internet or something. Tag us because I want to see it. That's so cool. Yeah.
Well, our next group is the Sleuths. Do you want to start off on the Sleuths here?
Sure. So the Sleuths probably grew up reading a mix of the original text and revised text, and they probably have a very strong opinion over which one they prefer. I have experienced this firsthand. You guys have favorites. But you guys probably had bookshelves that were lined with the iconic yellow spines. And then there's like that 40-year gap after the Bonita Granville movies. And then, of course, the 77 show came out. So you could probably also call later members of this group the Sean Cassidy girlies because of the Hardy Boys Nancy Drew TV show. You probably may also think that Pamela Sue Martin's Nancy is the best representation of Nancy. I do think Pamela Sue Martin's Nancy is probably one of the best ones.
It's pretty spot on.
And obviously we have named this group the Sleuths because of Jen Fisher's fan group, the Sleuths, which she created. Obviously later, not at this time period, but this is y'all's generation. So
Yeah, I think Jen probably, I don't remember exactly when she said she first became a fan, but I feel like she probably belonged to this group. And then later members of this group would make up the official fan group, the Sleuths, but that didn't actually happen until the year 2000, I think. So I'm getting a little ahead of myself in this. Obviously, if someone like Jen Fisher made a big contribution to the community, it's not going to be around the time when she first started reading Nancy Drew when she was 10. You know, it's going to happen later. So those actual contributions, we'll talk about them later in the time that they actually happened, even though the people were part of the later or the earlier groups, if that makes sense. So.
Right. It just has to do with how people grow up and when people, experience Nancy. So it's tricky. It's tricky. But yes, this Nancy is going to be revised text Nancy. So she is 18. She's older. She's a little bit more refined, a little bit more demure, less spunky. But of course, she has also become a fashion icon. Even in the revised textbooks, there is a big emphasis on what Nancy is wearing. But then, of course, obviously, with the induction of Pamela Sue Martin as Nancy, the most stylish Nancy ever.
My heart.
And she is in her fully titian-colored hair era now because of that misprint possibly on the Rudy Nappy book. So yeah, you guys probably think of Nancy as being a little bit more redheaded than blonde.
Yes. So what was it actually like being a fan around this time? So obviously this 1977 TV show had easily the biggest hype for any Nancy Drew TV show still to this day. And is still, of course, one of the most beloved Nancy Drew adaptations of any of the, we have like 7, if you count up all the movies. This show, of course, marked the very first time that Nancy Drew met the Hardy Boys, a move that would prove to impact the franchise from here on out. So that's very, very important. And this show also got a ton of merch associated with it. And this is really the first time in Nancy Drew history that we're starting to see merch and collectibles at this level. I don't think that the movie really even got this, really any. I've never seen like I don't think the T-shirts were really a thing back in 1930 to promote Benita Granville's movie, but oh boy, was it a thing by this time. For the first time ever, you could buy officially licensed Nancy Drew merch. So there was like a Halloween costume. You could show your love for Sean Cassidy with a T-shirt with his face on it. There was also like puzzles, watches, dolls, book tie-ins, lunchboxes.
Have a jacket?
She had the jacket. The blue satin jacket with Sean Cassidy's face on the back of it.
So cute.
Yeah. Isn't that adorable?
Oh my god.
Oh my gosh.
Poor Sean Cassidy.
Yes.
Just an absolute global heartthrob for little girls everywhere. It must have been so uncomfortable.
I know. I actually feel bad for them. All the stories that we've read of them like getting harassed and having to like take secret exits through buildings just to get away from these people.
Yeah.
Goodness. Yeah. I'm glad that this type of behavior isn't as normalized today. Well, maybe it is, but like don't grope celebrities. You know, don't do that to them, even if they are handsome or whatever. Yeah.
Don't harass them at places for their pictures. You can ask, but if they say no, go away. You know?
I'm pretty sure Sean Cassidy is still dealing with that to this day because he's still super famous, but whatever.
What a time, man.
Promotional fan clubs in the 1960s. This was not actually something that we included in our History of Illustrators episode. But in the 60s, they did bring on another illustrator just for one of these book clubs. Her name is Polly Bolian. She didn't do all of them. I think she did about a dozen of the covers, I want to say. But for this book club, you got specifically one of the books with just her illustrations on it. So if you wanted one of her illustrations, you could only get it through the book club. But that was the like incentive or whatever for this Nancy Drew Readers Club in the 60s that you would buy, I think it was like $1.50. You would buy the subscription model and get a new book every month with specifically her art on it.
That's cool.
Yeah. And then they also, in the 60s, they released picture covers for the book clubs they look very similar to what the Yellow Spine picture covers look like. I'm sure many people are familiar with those. It's like the most famous image of the Nancy Drew books that there are, except that they didn't put the numbers on the spines. And the back of the book is blank entirely. So they just look a little bit different than the normal ones. But.
Interesting.
And then the Lavender editions or the twin thrillers were also a book club exclusive. A lot of people have seen those kind of light purple spines.
I have one.
Oh, you do have one. Yes.
I do have one.
Isn't that pretty? Yeah. I love those.
I think this might actually be a library edition or I don't know.
It might be. The library editions were also special as well.
Anyway.
And then there was also a promotional fan club for the 70s show as well. This company set up like a ordering system where you could buy like signed photos and bookmarks. And there was like a newsletter, I think, that you could order about the show. And so there's just little fun fan incentives for that kind of stuff as well.
Yeah, that's nice.
But then we'll move on to our next group here. This is the Nancy Drew Hardy Boys fans, which of course I have named because that Nancy Drew Hardy Boys crossover thing had recently become so popular. Mm-hmm. So this is 1980 to 97. Do you want to start us off with this group?
Sure. So this group was absolutely spoiled by Simon & Schuster. The amount of Nancy Drew books and just merch and everything that came out around this time was insane. Kori has posted a timeline of like, you know, Nancy Drew's like different like books publishes over time, like bar chart on our Instagram. And did you save that post somewhere? Is it just one of our posts, like our main posts on our main feed?
It is, but I also put it on our website. If anyone wants to go there, you can find it. Yeah.
Perfect. Go to our website.
It's under the Nancy Drew history section. Yeah.
Because it was so much. This is when the files and the super mysteries were published. This is also when the Bluebeard Room was published. So if you were a fan at this time, you were exposed to that, probably at way too young of an age. Literally sex, drugs, and rock and roll in that book. And yeah, as you said before, you named this group because you guys got to read the Nancy Drew Hardy Boys crossover book series for the first time. Iconic.
The super mysteries.
Yeah, the super mysteries, which we love. This Nancy is a little bit different as well. She's starting to lean into like a little bit more of the grittier crime situations, the more real life situations, right? She takes risks. The danger has been heightened. She's also more independent than ever, right? She doesn't have to check in with Carson anymore to say where she's going because she's fully an adult. And at this point in time, she's really kind of developing that agency.
Especially in the files.
Maybe
not as much in the digest, but definitely in the files. Yeah.
Yeah. Because I remember reading Haunted Carousel was still kind of like she was having to ask Carson's permission to do things, but in the files that does not exist. That's
right.
happen. And yes, her fashion sense gets completely overhauled, especially when you look at the files cover. We talked about this when we talked about the Nancy Drew illustrators. Who is it? Who we met at the convention?
Oh, Trisha
Zimick. She talked about kind of the Nancy Drew rebrand of her style and how they were wanting her to look on these files covers. Just way different, obviously 80s fashion, right? Is what they were going for here. So she is obviously still very trendy, but she wears pants. She wears like leather jackets and cool stuff like that, you know? And of course she might actually be in love with Frank Hardy, right? That's a big plot point in the files. And everybody in the fandom is divided about this from this moment moving forward. You are either a Frank shipper or a Ned shipper, or, you know, none of the above, which is fair. So the fan experience for this time, there was this, the on-campus series came out at this time, and there was a Simon & Schuster initiated this vote so that fans could call in to say whether or not they thought that Ned and Nancy should break up. And fans actually voted for them yes to break up. And then that happened in the series. Group...
It's just so funny too. This was another thing that I was thinking about when I had the idea for this episode of like, you know, so many, I feel like a lot of the older fans just love Nancy Ned and that's it for them. Yeah. But so many people from our generation are like, but Frank, But what about Frank Hardy?
But Frank.
And I was like, well, where did that come from, though? And same with the fashion sense as well. We update her for the 80s. And of course, she's very fashionable at this time period. How did we get to her interactive with making fun of mom jeans and horse t-shirts? You know, like where exactly did that divide come from? And I see that it's from this group, you know. Yes. Yeah. We had, of course, the Files, the 80s. Nancy Drew, she was wearing very trendy clothing, very hip clothing. Mom jeans were very cool in the 80s, but then her interactive just didn't update her. And here she is in 2005, still in her mom jeans.
Not cool anymore.
Exactly. And so that's where it came from, you guys. Yeah. Mystery solved.
Yeah.
I just think it's so funny.
It's fascinating. I love too, like just this tidbit is that even like just in the very experience of like the Nancy Drew books, fans were involved. Like from the start to like now, like obviously she got so super popular so quickly, and that would not have happened without like support from so many like fans and readers. So like that's why the films got made, you know. And then even like to get as granular as this, like the on-campus series, and like dialing in to decide whether or not Ned and Nancy should break up, and people called in, and then they actually influenced what happened in the books because of that, you know. Like so that like kind of fan interaction has just like been weaved into Nancy Drew's actual history, which is fascinating.
I can't imagine that outcome of yes, break Nancy and Ned up. I can't imagine that same outcome would have happened if you'd asked fans that in the 50s or the 60s or even the 70s.
Yeah.
But now that the 77 show is out, it's like, oh, you know what? Let's explore that. Let's see what happens. You know, I love it.
It's interesting. This group also got to see the second Nancy Drew TV show to air, starring Tracy Ryan. Obviously, we just had our interview with them come out last month, which was so exciting. And they also had the crossover TV show episodes with the Hardy Boys as well. And this group also got to learn the true identity of Carolyn Keene for the first time. You want to talk about that, Kori?
Yes, we have quite a long story here, actually, so bear with me, but this will take us back from 1930, hopefully pretty much up to today, or at least up until that conference that we talked about that happened in the 90s. Okay, so yes, let's take it back to 1930. A lot of people believe that Stratemeyer Syndicate ghostwriters were under like a 100% NDA that would prevent them from ever telling anyone that they wrote Nancy Drew or any other Stratemeyer Syndicate properties, but this wasn't exactly the case. The contracts that ghostwriters signed with Edward Stratemeyer were pretty simple, and then Harriet continued to use pretty similar ones after she and her sisters started taking over the syndicate. So basically, whenever ghostwriters signed these agreements, it made them agree to the following things. One, of course, the Stratemeyer Syndicate gets full rights to publish the manuscript. Duh, that's like the whole point of them writing this, is so that they can print this book. Two, the author cannot claim rights to the book. So, for example, they couldn't write to Warner Brothers and tell them, oh, you have to put me in the credits of the Benita Granville movies because I'm the author. Actually, funnily enough, Mildred did try to do this with the 70s show, and she got a very strong cease and desist for it. So I think it's actually pretty funny, but whatever. And then, of course, they cannot use the pen name outside of their work for the syndicate. So Mildred can't just like outside of her work for the syndicate just go and publish a book called Nancy Drew. She could only do that within the context of her work for the syndicate, just for example. So, in fact, do you want to just read the contract from Leslie McFarlane here?
Yeah, this is really interesting. So, for and in consideration of the sum of $125, the receipt of which is hereby acknowledged, I hereby sell, transfer, and set aside to Edward Stratemeyer, literary agent, his heirs, and assigns all my right, title, and interest in a certain story written by me on a title and outline furnished by said Edward Stratemeyer and named The Hardy Boys, The Tower Treasure. In making this transfer, I hereby affirm that my work on the story is absolutely new, and I hereby grant to Edward Stratemeyer full permission to print the story under any trademark pen name that may be his business property, and I further agree that I will not use such pen name in any manner whatsoever. Signed, Leslie McFarlane.
Yes. Which, of course, he was, if you're not familiar, he was basically the Mildred of the Hardy Boys. He wrote, I think, like the first 25 or something, or most of the first 25 or so. Okay, so we know that it wasn't like strictly forbidden by the syndicate, or at least that's what we can gather from what we just read, right? That's not to say, though, that it wasn't highly discouraged by the syndicate to not tell people that you were one of their ghostwriters, especially to any official sources like newspapers or whatever. For the most part, the syndicate hired ghosts on a book-by-book basis, not as like a long-standing contract. And so, of course, if they liked you, they would tend to rehire you for the same series if everything went well. But the practice of being able to switch between authors whenever they needed to do so was built into their business model from the beginning. That's the whole reason that they decided to use ghost names, so that if a certain author couldn't, or they didn't want that author to continue with the series, and they could just easily switch without having to explain to their readers, oh, this is why there's a new author name on the book all of a sudden. So when ghosts were hired for a given book, they would receive a packet in the mail with an outline for their story and a contract for that book. If they agreed to the outline and the price that was being proposed, then they would just sign the contract and get started on writing. The Stratemeyers, once they received the final manuscript, they would do some final edits, and then they would send the story to print. So this meant that Harriet technically never needed to fire any ghostwriters who revealed their identity or otherwise broke the rules. She could just stop sending them new work. Walter Carrig, who was temporarily Carolyn Keene for books 8, 9, and 10 when Mildred had some other responsibilities, and also they were reducing the price a little bit because of the Great Depression and all. She passed for those 3 books. So he came on and wrote them, and then divulged to the Library of Congress that he was Carolyn Keene. And guess what? New contracts stopped arriving. I think Harriet actually did say some things to him. Here, I don't think that she just like silently stopped communicating with him. I think that something did happen here. But ultimately, the result was that he was fired. Same thing with Mildred here. Her contracts just mysteriously stopped arriving after she and Harriet had some disagreements about the writing process itself. So yeah, that's how Mildred just stopped writing for Nancy Drew. She was never told you're fired or that's it. It was just she was waiting for another contract and it just never showed up.
Yeah.
So and I know that earlier I said that she like divulged to the writers of the 77 show that she was Carolyn Keene. Despite her actions after the time that she left the syndicate, she was actually really quiet about her work as Carolyn Keene at the time that she was writing. While she was actually Carolyn Keene, she never said anything publicly. She didn't say anything publicly until years and years later. And the rumor is that her own daughter didn't even know that she was Carolyn Keene.
Yeah, wow.
As far as the syndicate was concerned, if you asked them, like, hey, I want to meet Carolyn Keene, yeah, she was a real person. The syndicate received a ton of fan mail at the time. So if you wrote a letter to Carolyn Keene, you would get a letter from Carolyn Keene back, usually written by one of his secretaries, right?
Yeah.
However, as time went on and more mystery began to surround the author's identity, Harriet slowly began to take all the credit. In the 60s, or by the 60s, she was autographing books as Carolyn Keene, aka Harriet Stratemeyer Adams, and she gave interviews in which she claimed that the first 3 books in the series were written by her father, and she wrote everything else after he passed away. Even today, Harriet is incorrectly listed as the author for many Nancy Drew books that she did not actually write in various official sources. So the Wikipedia page, it's wrong, guys. The syndicate records, some of those are wrong as well. Yeah. Of course, like if Harriet puts in a press release and sends it out and says, I wrote this, of course, that's going to be the official record. So as far as anyone knew until 1980, Harriet was Carolyn Keene. Except for those first 3 stories, she wrote everything. Or at least that was the story.
Wild.
Yeah. And so how did these records even get established aside from Harriet just straight out lying? So librarians do all the work, of course.
Yay!
So, you know what? Just a quick moment of appreciation for libraries and librarians. Thank you. We love you.
Thank you all so much. We love you. The unsung heroes of our day.
Yes, so truly. According to, Esther Green Beerbaum was one of the contributors to the Rediscovering Nancy Drew book. According to her, she was a librarian and a professor at the University of Iowa. Many libraries and archives use common databases for books and authors. So the example that she gave was, let's say it's Tom Sawyer by Mark Twain. It would say in the record, see also Samuel Clemens. So ideally, you would be able to search for Samuel Clemens and find any book that was actually written by Samuel Clemens, but also any book that was published under Mark Twain, if that makes sense. So ideally, if you search for Mildred Wirt Benson, you should get a full list of her publications, regardless of if it was actually a Mildred Wirt Benson published story, if it was a Carolyn Keene or any of the other ghost names that she used. But this was not the case. So unfortunately, like we said earlier, a lot of libraries at the time didn't carry Nancy Drew in their library, especially in the earlier days. So no documentation of this sort was made in these official databases either. One exception to this was the Library of Congress, which did keep syndicate books. But of course, their records were also incorrect because the syndicate told them Harriet wrote them all. Which is interesting because Leslie McFarlane is credited, or was at the time, as Franklin W. Dixon.
But didn't he specifically write to the Library of Congress? Or no, I'm thinking of Walter Carrick. That's who I'm thinking of, Walter Carrick.
He did. And that was part of his firing, was that he wrote to them, was like, hey, I was actually Carolyn Keene.
That's actually crazy, though, that like if that was the drama, because then that was correct. You know what I mean? Like, it's correct information and is a way to like catalog his actual work. And
the syndicate really wrote to the Library of Congress and was like, take that out, delete it. And the Library of Congress agreed to it.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Crazy.
So soon after Mildred's departure from the Nancy Drew series, which I believe was in 1953, she was contacted by Grace Van Wormer, who was the assistant directors at the Library of the University of Iowa, which was Mildred's alma mater. So at the time, Wormer was going through a list of alumni, and she was trying to like compile a list of all of their alumni who were now authors. She was trying to make a list of all of their published works. So she writes to Mildred and she's like, hey, I see that you're one of our alumni. You're now an author. Could you send me a list of your books? And Mildred responded and she was like, I never kept a list, so I don't know. Which I think is pretty funny. But eventually she was able to come up with a sort of a list, and her Stratemeyer works were on it. Now, of course, at the time she was still like following her thing where she didn't tell anyone about her work for the syndicate. So she did tell the library, like, yes, I did write as Carolyn Keene, but this is strictly confidential. It is for your records only. You're not to make any of this public. She like forbade them from telling anyone. She was like, this is really just for internal records so that someone somewhere knows at all. Like, just keep it in storage. Don't tell anyone. Because she was afraid that the Stratemeyer syndicate would retaliate against her.
Yeah.
So, okay. So if the records don't even paint a full picture, and if everyone was so secretive, if you did know the truth, how do fans know the truth today? Because of hardworking fans, of course. So here's a story about one of our fans who probably belonged to one of the earlier fan groups, but of course his main contribution is worth mentioning now. In 1963, a high schooler who grew up as a fan of Nancy Drew and the Hardy Boys, his name was Geoffrey Lapin, he took a particular interest in the true identity of Carolyn Keene. So according to Lapin, he learned that Carolyn Keene wasn't a real person when he was in high school. And this sparked a real desire in him to find out who she really was. Because until he was in high school, he assumed that she was a real person. Because obviously that's what the syndicate wanted everyone to believe at the time, right?
Yeah, why wouldn't you?
Yeah, of course. So he spends about 3 years trying to research and track down who the real Carolyn Keene would have been, and doesn't have any luck until he's just looking at a reference book in the library in his hometown, and he sees that someone has put in a little tiny pencil scribbled in notation in the margins of this reference book next to Carolyn Keene's name. Someone wrote, Stewart, Mildred A.
What?
So it was a secret, but like someone knew.
Someone knew. Yeah.
And we don't know who wrote this pencil notation. We have no idea. But this led Lapin to a list of books that were actually published under Mildred's own name, because of course Mildred wrote a ton of stories. She had more than 100 books on her list. Not all of them were syndicate properties. Some were just written as Mildred Wirt Benson, or just Mildred Wirt, or just Mildred Ann, or, there's a lot of different variations of her own name. Around the same time, Frank Paluca, who was the head of special collections at the University of Iowa, he actually came across that list that Mildred had previously given to Grace Van Wormer probably about 10 years prior. He realized the list was actually not complete at all. And this next part of the story, I was looking at like 4 different sources and trying to piece together a timeline from all of them. It's not entirely clear to me specifically how or when this happened, but at some point, Lapin and Palooka got together to like merge their 2 lists. Either that or Palooka got the full list first and then maybe gave it to Lapin at a later time. I'm not sure exactly, because the wording in the sources themselves is really vague on how this happened. But essentially now Lapin has a complete list. And working off that complete list, he started to compile a physical collection of first edition copies of all of Mildred's works. In 1969, Lapin was finally able to track down Mildred herself, and he says that upon meeting her, there was no doubt in his mind that she was the real Carolyn Keene. She had all this evidence. She sounded just like the way that her manuscripts sounded, like just in the flow of the way she speaks and everything. He's like, this is her. There's no doubt in my mind. And Lapin actually got to attend the court case. And this court case marks the first time that Mildred's identity was made public. So in 1980, Simon Schuster's parent company and Grosset and Dunlap went to court over the rights to publish Nancy Drew books. Because as we know, in the years prior, Harriet had decided to break her long-running relationship with Grosset and Dunlap in favor of using Simon & Schuster instead. I think that there was something with money that it would have been a little bit cheaper to go with Simon & Schuster. Grosset and Dunlap didn't like that, though, so they sued. Simon & Schuster's argument that they should be able to print Nancy Drew books without Grosset and Dunlap's permission was that the syndicate should not have been able to claim full rights to the stories because they had not written them themselves. And the syndicate, their position was still that, nope, Harriet wrote all of the Nancy Drews. So Mr. Lapin actually let the lawyers or whoever use his collections of first editions as evidence in the case. And Simon & Schuster's lawyers also produced a number of syndicate documents and contracts that proved the extent of the work that Mildred did for them. They also brought in a very, very key witness, Mildred Ware Benson herself.
Right.
Oh my God. This might be my favorite part of the story. Upon seeing Mildred at the courthouse, Harriet famously had just one thing to say to her: "I thought you were dead." Rude.
I thought you were dead. Oh my God.
Ultimately, though, the judge did rule in favor of the syndicate, and it was decided that Grosset and Dunlap would retain exclusive rights to publish hardback copies only of books 1 through 56, while Simon & Schuster could publish new books, but only in paperback. And despite the word being out there now, like it's officially in public court record, which, by the way, Mildred was actually like more than happy enough with. She had resigned herself to the idea that no one would ever know she was Carolyn Keene.
Yeah.
And she actually wrote in a letter at some point later, she was like, the truth is in the court transcript. So it's out there. It exists. If people really want to know, then they can find that information. And she was happy enough to just leave it at that and not have her like really have it be anything more than that. But the story, of course, does not end there. In 1982, through a lot of hard work, Lapin actually managed to convince the Library of Congress to correct their records. So this got updated, and of course, today Mildred is listed as Carolyn Keene for the books that she really did write in the Library of Congress's records. He did also later donate his entire collection of first edition works of Mildred's works to the University of Iowa's archives, just so that anyone can visit them and appreciate those stories. And even today, you can go and see her books in their archives. And then more than a decade passed since that court case, and not much happened with this. Again, Mildred was just kind of content with the outcome of that. And then one day, a student assistant, an undergraduate at the University of Iowa, she was working at the library. Her name was Susan Redfern. Her job for that summer, I guess, was digitizing a bunch of their alumni archives. And she's just going through the stack of documents that she has to digitize. And she sees the name Nancy Drew in one of the stacks. And of course, Susan grew up as a fan of Nancy Drew herself. So she stops in her tracks at seeing Nancy's name in these archives. And she realizes that, she's in here because the author was one of our alumni. And she's like, wait, why is that not public knowledge? Why are people not talking about this? What the heck? Yeah. And so she goes to other women on staff at the library, and she goes to other professors at the university, and this group of women all get together, and they're like, why was this never like a thing? Like, why did no one ever honor Mildred in this way? And so they all start talking, and they, like, oh, I was a fan of Nancy Drew, and oh, I remember my yellow hardback collection. And they're all just reminiscing and sharing stories of Nancy Drew. And eventually they decided, yeah, we need to do something. We need to get Mildred honored here. And the idea for the conference was born. And I'm really mad about this because had our mothers just planned a little bit better, we could have made it in attendance, because this conference took place April 16th to 18th, 1993, just weeks before you were born, and like 2 months before I was born. So, of course, we were not personally there, but that was held at the University of Iowa, and Mildred Ward Benson was there as their guest of honor. Guys, I cannot tell you how much excitement surrounded this event. There was so much buzz going on leading up to the conference, and Mildred was actually even interviewed on ABC News some night the week leading up to the conference. So there was all this buzz about it, and actually reminded a lot of now grown-up fans about their love for the series. There was all this like nostalgic revival going on this year. And for many people, this sparked a reintroduction to their favorite sleuth. And I think that that's actually why the title of the book is Rediscovering Nancy Drew. And this event sparked so much excitement within the fandom that a couple of months following the conference, Mildred was officially given permission to identify herself as Carolyn Keene from there on out. And Grothin and Dunlap agreed that they would credit Mildred in new printings of the stories that she originally wrote.
Which is huge.
Yeah. It's absolutely massive. No other ghostwriter has this level of like honor or acknowledgement to them. And so that acknowledgement in the books is made to Mildred Ward Benson, who under the pen name Carolyn Keene wrote the original Nancy Drew books. And then, as we know, in August 1993, Simon & Schuster actually agreed to donate their Stratemeyer Syndicate archives to the New York Public Library for anyone to use, although it did actually end up taking about 3 years for the library staff to actually go through everything and catalog it so that it could be shown to the public. So it wasn't until like maybe 96 or so that you could actually go and do it, but that was the year that the donation was made.
And unsurprisingly so, because there is a lot.
So much.
So many
much,
boxes
you guys.
of stuff.
Yeah. And then just a real quick note about Geoffrey Lapin here. If that name sounds familiar to you at all, it's because this work that he's done, this whole big long story that I've just told you, that's just like a fraction of the Nancy Drew research that he has done. He's also done a ton of research into other ghostwriters and was my number one source for our episode on the illustrators when we were talking about Russell Tandy, because he is like the person, the expert on Russell Tandy out there. Like he went and met the family and is the only reason we know about him as much as we do today.
Yeah.
And of course, he's not the only person that has done super, super impressive work. I don't mean to play favorites or anything. I could sit here for hours with a list of people that have made just as important contributions as Mr. Lapin did. But yeah, I just really wanted to share that story because I think that it is super, super cool.
Yeah.
So.
It's such a dramatic story and such a testament to, just the power of like a fandom to, especially like, it's so great too. It's like Nancy Drew fandom, like finding and uncovering an actual real life mystery and bringing like justice to like, people who deserve to get credit for the work that they did. Like, it's just such an amazing, amazing story.
I just think it's so funny. Like, okay, Stratemeyer Syndicate, you wanted to keep this a secret, but then you raised all of us to be sleuths and you thought that one of us wouldn't come and find that information. Of course somebody found it. So
you wrote a mystery into your mysteries. You literally hired ghostwriters. Of course we're going to find out who they are.
Yeah.
Of course we are.
I love it so much. Gosh, and there's still so much work to be done because, of course, everything that I just said regarding like the contracts and the rules with secrecy, that was only relevant to the Stratemeyer Syndicate. Just to be clear, Simon & Schuster has made everyone sign confidentiality agreements since they took over everything. So there's a lot of like current Carolyn Keene stuff that we probably won't know for a good, maybe even 100 years from now even, so.
Yeah, well, and even when we got to interview Janice Gangsey for last year, she's obviously a ghostwriter for Simon & Schuster, but she could not tell us which books that she had ghostwritten because of that agreement. So it's interesting. Yeah, we may never know. We may never know. for these Nancy Drew diaries.
You want to take it from here?
Yes. Okay. So for this group as well, there were also some promotional fan clubs. In the 1980s, the Wanderer books had an ad in the back of the book for the official Nancy Drew Hardy Boys fan club. And that allowed you to subscribe to like this official newsletter called The Mystery Reporter. Super cute. And that was produced by Simon & Schuster and had like, you know, little fun things in it, like an interview with Harriet or like sneak peeks for like upcoming books and stuff like that. Also, in the 90s, the Aladdin books featured ads for the official Nancy Drew Girlfriends Club, which is also very cute. Yes. I want to be a part of that one. Mm-hmm. And the Files also had a fan club that was advertised, but just in the UK editions of the books. And memberships came with little puzzle sheets and decoders and bookmarks and stuff like that. So very, very fun. Our next fan group, Kori. It is our fan group, the Clue Crew, from 1998 to 2015. Obviously, we were all obsessed with the Nancy Drew Her Interactive PC games.
I'm pretty sure we named ourselves this. Like, I don't think Her Interactive called us this. I think that at some point we just started calling ourselves the Clue Crew. So that's why this group is named that.
I mean, I think we have to really credit the internet, right, for this, because this was the time, really. I mean, obviously the internet existed in some early forms before this, but this kind of like late 90s was really when message boards and forums and all of this stuff was really kicking off, which also you can credit the creation of the Sleuths fan club with this as well. But yeah, that's why, right, this kind of name came around, is because we all got together on Her Interactive's forums and started talking and, you know, decided to, name ourselves. Also, the 2007 Emma Roberts movie came out in theaters at this time. So if you were a fan at this time, you probably went to go see that. You probably grew up with the flashlight editions or the digests or even Girl Detective. I grew up with a lot of Girl Detective books. So sad. And also, this group may have found Nancy at even a younger age because we also had the notebooks that were created at this time. And that was really for ages like 6 to 8 for really young readers. So, interesting. And this Nancy, in true to all 90s fashion, was a lot about girl power, you know? And like, you were talking about before, like maybe like her fashion sense kind of stuck around a little bit from the 80s. So her fashion is considered maybe a little bit out of date, you know? But of course, she's got updated technology now. She's usually got a cell phone, usually has a laptop. In the Girl Detective series, she has a hybrid car, you know?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So lots of technology and, you know, new stuff there. The PC games obviously ensured that we also have a love for the Nancy Ned drama. And also, you know, Lonnie Minella, Emma Roberts, Maggie Lawson. These are all the women that we think of when we think of what Nancy Drew looks or sounds like.
Yes, exactly.
So we talked a little bit about the online message board. So that was really where a lot of this group's identity kind of formed. And that was really intentional on Her Interactive's part. You know, obviously the creation of the PC games in and of themselves was to try to kind of get girls into technology and into video games. And so it was really important for them to make a safe online space for kind of girls and young women. The Her Interactive advertised itself, like their very first website, advertised themselves as being a girls' internet homepage. Also had like pages for fashion and makeup advice, which is maybe a little bit pandering there. Yeah. But you know, you can see the intent, right? But they had like book and poetry recommendations. They also had essay contests and all that stuff. So it really was interactive. Hers founding coincided also, with the wild, wild west of the internet. They also encouraged girls to use their message boards from the very beginning. And this kind of marketing worked really well to just kind of, develop buzz for like upcoming games and everything like that. It was also a really great place to figure out what the heck you were doing wrong with the puzzle. Like, I can't figure it out. Please, someone help me. So yeah. And yes, they are still alive and still functioning today. Although I think a lot of Nancy Drew fans have migrated to other spaces on the internet more heavily, like Reddit, Instagram, places like that. But they do still exist.
We're everywhere. Nancy Drew fans. We're on every platform.
It's so true. In September 2007, Arglethump created his YouTube channel, which makes him the very first Nancy Drew content creator. Snaps to you, Arglethump, being on YouTube early. And then, yes, also AO3 was established at this time. So we've got lots of Nancy Drew fan fiction. What?
I think we need a dramatic reading, actually.
Oh my god.
If you would indulge us.
Oh my god.
Okay. I've included a little snippet here from a fan fiction. Actually, last summer I was really bored and I put out a call on Instagram. I was like, someone send me your favorite fanfic. And y'all sent some phenomenal ones. But the one that I've chosen here is from the user Nancy Drew and the Hardy Boys on Instagram. Y'all sent us a link to this one. I loved it. It was so good. And that's the story that I've chosen for this little excerpt here.
Okay. A picture's worth 1,000 words by user KIIB_6. And in this story, Nancy, Frank, and Joe are in Chicago attending ClueCon. And this scene takes place in a whodunit mystery dinner where Nancy and Frank are having a conversation with Celesta, who is the organizer of the con. Oh my god. Okay. Celesta trailed off as her phone buzzed with an incoming call. Swearing under her breath, Celesta tucked the illuminated screen against her shirt and darted into the hallway. "This is weird," Frank muttered. "I think we should follow her," said Nancy. "I don't like the way they're talking." Frank nodded. "Let's go." Trailing after Frank, Nancy looked around the hallway outside the ballroom and spotted Celesta turning a corner at the other end past a small alcove and a set of bathrooms. They jogged to catch up before Frank suddenly stopped, motioning for Nancy to be quiet. "I know," Celesta was saying to someone on the other end of the telephone call. "Ian's been working on it. There was a pause, and Nancy turned to Frank. He met her eyes and gave her a knowing look. "I promise it's a good one," Celesta continued, sounding annoyed. "We're pulling out all the stops. I can get interviews from the people here once it happens. We might even consider making this one a YouTube series since it's more of a visual thing." Another pause. "Well, do you want it done by the deadline or do you want a good season?" The bathroom door shut behind Nancy and Celesta turned, looking up toward where they stood. Nancy and Frank quickly ducked behind the corner, praying they hadn't been seen. "I think I'm going to have to call you back," Celesta said with a suspicion in her voice. The next thing Nancy heard was the clicking of high heels stomping down the hallway. Celesta was coming right toward them. "In here," Nancy hissed. "Quick!" They shuffled into the alcove they'd passed and squeezed behind a vending machine. Nancy found herself pressed against Frank's chest, her hands awkwardly at her sides. As Celesta's footsteps grew closer, Nancy could feel her heart pounding against her ribs and knew it was only partially for fear of being discovered. Sorry.
It's so good.
Her mind scrambling for a cover, Nancy glanced up at Frank, his face inches from hers. His eyes were blown wide and his breathing was fast and shallow. For a moment, Nancy imagined that this reaction was because of her. She lost herself briefly in a haze of thoughts, imagining a scenario where Frank had gripped her arm, grinning as he guided her into this dark alcove away from prying eyes, pulling her close to him and lifting her chin with his long fingers before leaning closer and... Suddenly, the perfect cover story materialized in her mind. Without stopping to consider how Frank would react, Nancy quickly leaned up and brushed her lips against his cheek, smearing some of her dark lipstick on her skin. Oh my god! Oh my god, okay, wait. Last time, okay. "Hug me," she whispered. Frank responded automatically, his hands finding the small of her back while his face tried to mask his confusion. At that moment, Celesta appeared in the entryway to their hiding place. "Oh, sorry," Celeste said, jumping back for them and looking away embarrassed. I thought... Without thinking, Nancy snaked her hands around Frank's neck. "Oh," she said sheepishly, "my boyfriend and I were just looking for some privacy." Nancy could feel Frank's body tense at the contact before he realized what she was up to. Quickly, he regained his composure, running a hand down her arm and smiling at Celesta. "I'll leave you to it then," Celesta said, turning and practically sprinting back toward the ballrooms. "Way to think on your feet," Frank said, his hand still resting on Nancy's arm. "Thanks for going with it," she said. She made no move to extricate her arms from around his neck. It had been ages since she and Frank were this close, not since their case together in Egypt. Nancy had few regrets in life. One of them was the way she had left things with Frank on that last night of their case. She knew it had been wrong to kiss him, and entertained the thought of the two of them being together, but it felt equally wrong to go on with her life like Frank had no effect on her. Nancy loved Ned, but couldn't help but feel that their relationship had turned into one of convenience. The guilt she felt leaving Ned constantly to go off on another case at the drop of a hat was only surpassed by the shame she harbored for all of the times she and Frank had been more friendly toward one another than was strictly allowed in an exclusive relationship. Thinking of Ned, Nancy slowly unwound her arms from Frank's neck, letting them linger briefly on his broad chest before falling to her sides. "We should get back," she said softly. "Joe will be wondering where we've gone." Frank opened his mouth as if to say something before thinking better of it. Nodding, he guided Nancy back into the hallway and toward the ballroom.
Oh my gosh! This fandom will always find a way to put Nancy and Frank together, even if they have to write the story themselves. Like,
maybe I should turn to a career of narrating fan fiction.
Maybe you should. That was excellent.
Thank you.
I would listen to the whole story, just you narrating it like that. That was great.
God. Oh my gosh. I need to read this one. Is this the one you sent me?
I think so. This one was so good. It's a little long. I think this was from like chapter 5 or something. But
oh my God.
This author, I have to credit them. They were clearly a Nancy Drew fan. I think that the whole thing was really well written. And there's so many references in this story to other pieces of Nancy Drew history, like the case in Egypt thing. That's really a reference to a super mystery where they're in Egypt and they kiss in that book. So it's just, I love it. And then it just pulls in, like, there's references to the games and the 77 show, and the whole thing is that, like, this serial killer is going around leaving Polaroids of their victims in the spot where they got taken, and so that's clearly very much from the 70s show, and, like, there's just so many good little references. It's like some fan cared so much that they just, like, had to create this new thing. And there's 600 plus books. We could just go and read one of those, but we don't get the Nancy Frank goodness that we're all craving. I love it.
Yeah, without reading A Crime for Christmas over and over again.
Yeah. Thank you for indulging me in that, just because I loved it so much.
You're so welcome. You're so welcome.
I'll have to leave the link for that in the description of this episode in case anyone wants to go read that fanfic. Obviously, there's thousands out there. I don't mean to just, like, single this one person out, but that one was very enjoyable. That one
sounds pretty good. It sounds pretty good.
It. Yeah. Okay. It was like a full mystery, too. Like, there's a conclusion and everything. So, yeah, it was great.
Cool. So social media obviously played a big role in all of this, and just really is kind of what you could credit kind of Nancy's continuing popularity at this time too, is just everyone getting on social media and talking about, their love of the books. And then, of course, in April 10th, 2000, the Sleuths fan club was officially founded, which we mentioned before. And you can hear more about the history behind the group in our interview with Jen Fisher. We did that. Was that just last year or was it 2 years ago we did that?
I think it was episode 80, part 2.
Wow.
It was right after we did the Illustrators episode, because Illustrators was 80, part 1.
Right. Okay. Right. Yeah. But yes, according to Jen, she was part of this online listserv for discussing Nancy Drew, and then she decided to put together a formal fan group. And obviously we know Jen Fisher is a one-of-a-kind researcher, and she does work as a Nancy Drew consultant. She is also working on a Nancy Drew book about Mildred Wirt Benson, I think. Yes.
So excited
and she is president of the Sleuths fan club. She also, of course, plans and coordinates all of the Nancy Drew Sleuths conventions and get-togethers. And they typically happen a couple times a year and are themed after one or a few books. And she's donated her Nancy Drew collection to the library in Toledo. And you can actually go there and see her full collection on display. It's very cool. Yeah. And the very first sleuth convention actually was held in March of 2001, and Mildred Rick Benson was the guest of honor there in Toledo as well, which is, very cool.
And at the time that y'all are listening to this, there is an upcoming one in St. Louis in October 2026 this year, and we will be there. So
yes, we plan to be there.
Yes, come join us. If you plan to be there as well, let us know. We'd love to meet you.
Yes. Come say hi.
Yes.
And then the promotional fan clubs for this in the early 2000s, the Girl Detective series had a website where you could print off a membership card for the official Nancy Drew fan club, which was signed by both Nancy Drew and Carolyn Keene. And there was also a Nancy Drew and the Clue Crew club for younger fans that came with a junior detective membership card. It's very cute.
So cute. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Alrighty, well, our last group here is the Droods. Again, this is 2016 to 2026, and this group was actually named by Kennedy McMahon herself. She calls her fans the Droods, so that's just the name that I'm using for this group as well. And of course, fans from this time period see Kennedy as their best Nancy, or their ideal version of what Nancy should look and act like. This group is generally obsessed with the CW show, and because of that, the target audience, well, let me say this, the CW's target audience is 18 to 34, and this TV show itself is rated TV 14. So because of that, if this show was someone's first introduction to Nancy, it's most likely that they are older than a lot of the previous fan groups. They might be in their teens, even maybe their early 20s or something at the time of this. Yeah. And even if even if they were already familiar with Nancy prior to this show, because this show is older, they probably kept them interested in Nancy Drew for a little bit longer than they may have been otherwise. So I thought that was kind of interesting that we do have this thing that's marketed more toward teenagers, and how that is impacting what the fandom actually looks like.
I wonder, too, how much overlap there is between this group and the Clue Crew group as well, just because of that kind of age group thing, where we were younger when we first got exposed to the games and the books or whatever, but this group was older. And so I think by nature, yes, they're maybe a little bit younger than us generally, but also maybe not. They could also be our same age. So it's really not necessarily a generational thing as much as it is, just when you happen to discover Nancy thing.
Exactly.
And how. Yeah.
Many fans of this group actually also found the games for the first time in this 2016 to 2026 period, either just because they have been reintroduced to them. I hear from a lot of CW fans that they saw the show first and then learned about the games and became obsessed with the games that way.
Well, because Kennedy McMahon is a fan of the games.
Because she herself grew up loving them, and so people are like, oh, I want to go play the thing that my Nancy loved when she was growing up,
Well, also, streaming became a really big thing at this time. I don't know when Twitch became a website, but it must have been in this time. Let me look it up.
Well, maybe just before 2016.
Twitch. 2011. Okay.
2011. So yeah.
But
so we're just gaining popularity around this time.
Yeah. And so people started streaming themselves playing Nancy Drew games. There are tons of creators out there who have, done these. I watch Half Moon Joe's.
Oh yeah. Half Moon Joe's wonderful. Yeah.
Well, because I watched him back in 2000, way earlier in the YouTube days when he was Disney Kid 1 on YouTube. I don't know if you remember that. He was
I didn't realize that that's who he was.
Yeah,
I didn't realize
all of those people that we used to watch on YouTube,
gosh.
Haley G. Hoover and yeah.
Oh, cool. Yeah. I didn't realize he was the same person. Wow. Yes. The more you know, because I remember Disney Kid 1.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, also Her Interactive, of course, has put out 2 new games during this time that are pretty different than the previous 32 games in their series. So a lot of fans might be brand new to the game series at this time, and these 2 new games are really their first introduction to that. As far as books go, this group would have grown up with The Girl Detective and or the Diary series, because of course the Diary series was quite new at this time. And I think that this group is probably ready for a more personal, complex Nancy. Of course, they were the first group to grow up with Nancy Drew books really written from a first-person perspective. I guess the Clue Crew was as well, but I feel like they weren't like the number one books in our childhood. We were still very much into the digest as well. So of course, Clue Crew as well, but this group really is the first time that we've seen a lot of first-person stories. And of course, as we know, their TV Nancy is more mature than any previous depiction of Nancy Drew.
So yes, the CW Nancy is very, very different. Literally in the very first episode, she starts having sex. Like you just like cut to a scene of her in flagrante. So that is obviously not a taboo subject as it would be in the other series. And also Ned kind of just becomes this annoying ex-boyfriend. He's not like her perpetual forever steady or anything like that. And obviously there's a lot of drama with the CW show about like Hardy Boys and is it a Hardy Boy? Is it not a Hardy Boy? I'm going to see Nancy with a Hardy Boy kind of stuff. I don't want to get too spoilery. Also, I haven't watched the entirety of the CW show, so my kind of like experience with it is through you, Kori.
Right. Yeah.
But yes, this Nancy is also not afraid to be vulnerable or express herself. You talked a lot about this time as being kind of like a Drew drought, right? Because of her interactives hiatus. There's like obviously like no games or whatever. There were 2 games in the last 10 years.
10 years.
Which is wild.
Yeah.
Just so sad. And yes, the diaries were brand new at the start of this time period. And right now they're the only ongoing series because the kid series that served as companion to the diaries, the Clue books, was probably canceled. And now we're just getting like 1 book a year from the diaries, which something hasn't been the case since 1964. So like Drew drought indeed. There were some graphic novels during this time, which obviously we discussed at length and we love them. Yes, but they got a lot of criticism for quote unquote killing off Nancy, and they just weren't as like heavily discussed in the fandom.
I never see anyone talk about them. Let's talk about them more. Also, if you're mad that Nancy was killed off, just read it, please.
Please read it. Thank you. Okay. You can also listen to our interview with the author if you're, although we do spoil it and that, so maybe read it first. But anyway. And there was a 2019 movie with Sophia Lillis, but like I literally went to the theaters to go see this. There was one other person in the theater with me, and it was like opening weekend.
Yeah.
I'm like, I was so upset. I remember coming out and being like, there was no one there. It was dead. It was horrible. Anyway.
And it only made $600,000 total.
Yes. But it wasn't that bad of a movie. It was cute and sweet. You know what I mean? It wasn't a bad movie.
I saw a lot of people hating on it. Like, why the hell does she have a skateboard? And she's so updated and she's a tomboy. And why is she a tomboy? And
see, this is the thing. Okay. I just think I love like the concept of us deep diving into all of this and like us like kind of, you know, categorizing these different types of Nancy Drew fans according to like the Nancy Drew that they prefer. Because I think something that maybe you and I talk about it a lot, but I don't think we talk about it enough in the fandom as a whole are these kinds of like divisions within the fan community. Because a lot of these preferences or like these opinions do create a lot of divisiveness.
Right.
They create a lot of like criticism about like, the 2019 Sophia Lillis movie, for example, or the CW show, which people were up in arms about, or, you know, just like.
But people that weren't in the group that it was intended for is the
exactly.
thing.
And this is the thing, right? Is like, I think we all need to collectively, if we find ourselves being too critical. And like, I'm not one to talk. I feel like I sometimes get into spaces like this too, where I feel kind of like annoyed that a, Nancy Drew representation isn't like what I wanted or what I pictured. And it makes sense, right? Because that's kind of instinctual, because we're fans and we want more of what we love and what we've experienced or whatever. But I think, it's also okay to recognize like, okay, well, this Nancy Drew is not for me. Like, I have my Nancy Drews that I love. I'm going to spend more time with them. And yes, of course, I can still appreciate, other Nancy Drews and interact with them and like hopefully find things that I love about them. Like, maybe I don't have to like boycott a Nancy Drew TV show because I don't personally like it. You know what I mean? Just because it's a different Nancy Drew than what I grew up with or than what I think is quote unquote correct, it doesn't mean that it's bad. It doesn't mean that it's I'm not tarnishing anything. Just even from 1930 to 1950s, like there was so much change with who Nancy Drew was and Nancy Drew's character from the 50s to the 70s, from the 70s to the 90s. Like there's so much change, of course, because we've changed so much as a society, as generations do, How can we expect Nancy to stay as one, unchanging person when she's supposed to be accessible to young girls and be a role model for young girls of every generation? Of course, she's going to have to change a little bit because young girls grapple with different problems now than they used to, So, yeah.
Well said.
Anyway.
Yeah. So people, they want to complain, oh, Sophia Lillis or Kennedy McMahon, they were not the perfect ideal representation of Nancy Drew. Well, no, not to you, because you're not a Druid.
Yeah.
If you had grown up with the things that were contemporary to these stories, then you'd see that that was actually a very good representation at the time of what was in that generation. There are people in the collector group that rag on Pamela Sue Martin and think that she is a terrible, way too like modernized version of Nancy because she is not original text version. It's all like, it's all just within the context of what was the target audience for you at the time that you first became a fan,
But I think even throughout all of that, right? Like all of the division and, we can nitpick about things or whatever, but like there are these hallmarks to Nancy Drew that are always the same. Her independence, like her bravery, her cleverness, like things that like we can always lean back on and appreciate together. And I think even through like even new iterations of Nancy Drew that are going to come out now because of the it going into the public domain, like we can still see that and now appreciate like, okay, yes, maybe I don't like this representation because of X, Y, or Z, or it doesn't meet my expectation because of X, Y, or Z, or whatever. We can say, okay, but this is still valuable and this is still great because it is going to help someone and see it, help someone see in themselves these kind of tenets that carry through time that are still valuable, that, we do still want to champion, in those ways. So, yeah.
This is why I'm not worried about the public domain. Of course, like we've said, there's probably going to be some duds out there that happen because of this public domain thing. But truly, I mean, as long as, and fans know who Nancy Drew is, we can recognize her heart. As long as you still have who she is in the story, then whatever else you change isn't really going to be as important. Like, you're still going to get to the core of who she is, I think. Yeah. Anyway, back to the Drew drought.
Yes,
there were things happening. They were just like not received very well by fans. So sorry, I interrupted you there. You can keep going.
You're good. Yeah, no. So yeah, we talked about the Sophia Lillis movie. And then the CW show was popular for a while, but everyone kind of outside of the this particular Druid group didn't really like it. I didn't really like it either, but that actually ran longer than any other Nancy Drew TV shows. The Pamela Sue Martin TV show only ran for 3 seasons, and she wasn't even really in last season.
She only did 18. Well, no, Nancy was in 18 episodes total. Pamela Sue was 14 of those. Janet Louise Johnson was 4 of them. Yeah. So, and then this is 64 episodes, I think, 62 episodes.
5 seasons.
So 4 seasons.
4 seasons.
4 seasons is a long time for a show like this to go on. So whenever people are like, it's terrible, everyone hates it, I'm like, somebody likes it enough for it to have gone on for 4 seasons. And I think that it's this group that we can thank for that. So
And then also, Kori, and we've talked a little bit about this on the Patreon or in previous episodes, there is apparently a musical in the works. We are still kind of waiting on more information, although it seemed like there was some movement with it at the end of last year in November. There was like a stage reading and all of that. So it looks like we hopefully, fingers crossed, we'll get more news about that sometime soon. And maybe that'll break the Drew drought. And maybe that in combination with the, Nancy going into the public domain officially, the first 4 books, maybe we're going to get a new generation of Nancy fans here.
Yeah.
So, and honestly, if the musical kicks it off, I'm going to be so happy about that.
I know.
I think we are absolutely due for a Nancy Drew musical fan group. That would be amazing.
Oh my gosh. Yes. So yeah, that's why I call it the Drew drought. Obviously, there have been lots of things. We've had a few games. We had a show, a movie, graphic novels, several things that are great for the fandom, but there's just not as much going on, especially if you look in context with like the 80s when there was almost 30 books a year, 30 books, games, whatever, a year. And now we're at like 1 mystery a year total. And it's like, okay, y'all better keep the diaries going because if you cancel the diaries, we will have nothing. Because literally, since 2023, I think, we've gotten 1 mystery a year.
My God. They have to keep publishing the Nancy Drew diaries. If they do not, we cannot let the end of the Nancy Drew series happen on our watch. You know what I mean?
No, of course not.
Not on our watch, you guys. I need a petition for Simon & Schuster to start up like a Nancy Drew like promotional book club thing again, the way that they used to do, because I would absolutely pay into that, even if it's just for a book a year and like a monthly newsletter or something. And like maybe like an occasional tote bag or something like that. I would absolutely pay for that. So Simon & Schuster, if you're listening.
Oh yeah, the Hardy Boys equivalent, the Hardy Boys Adventures that started around the same time as the diaries, they canceled that when Hardy Boys went into the public domain. So there was just a few weeks ago, actually, in January 2026, they did publish a new Nancy Drew diaries. There's been no word about a potential cancellation, but just because of the Hardy Boys reason, I'm afraid that Simon & Schuster could be at this time of public domain reconsidering the series. Now, we've said this before. I think Simon & Schuster needs to consider another young adult series at this time. It's been long enough since the Files, and they already have teenage fans in the form of the CW show. Capitalize on that. Bring us older Nancy back, please and thank you.
Oh my God, that's such a good idea too, because the absolute book talk revolution stuff happening now, imagine okay, don't get mad at me, Drews, but imagine a sexy YA Nancy crime situation.
I mean, that was the Files, honestly.
Yeah, but with a little bit of a different tone, I feel like.
Okay.
I feel like the Files are a little bit more poppy. Do you know what I mean? Pop. How else do I say this? I
know what you mean.
Going to the mall.
Yeah.
Popular. Pools,
modeling shoots and
country clubs,
trips and
and yes. Whereas I feel like a YA Nancy Drew today would need to be a little bit grittier and less
more haunted house,
more haunted house.
Yeah, because there's none of that in the Files, as we know.
Yes, yeah, but I don't think it needs to be supernatural. I mean, they can do that if they want to do, but I feel like probably because the CW show did that, they probably shouldn't. But
give us gritty without going full supernatural.
Yes. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And heavy on the romance. I think it would have to be heavy on the romance. I think, honestly, that's the way they would do it if they did it. The best way they could do it is if they did it playing up the romance aspects more than the crime aspects. that like the previous ones did, right? Like obviously
like the
the
on-campus
files,
series.
yes, but like I'm thinking like we need way more relationship drama, like heartache stuff, not like dates and boyfriends. Do you know what I mean? Like we need longing, we need yearning. We haven't gotten that in a Nancy Drew series.
I was thinking about this the other day. I think you and I would love the on-campus series. I've never read any of them. I don't know if you've ever read any of them.
No, I have some, but I don't think I've read them.
I have a handful as well. I know we've never covered one on the podcast. Yeah. And they got criticism at the time for being too much drama, not enough mystery, too much romance. I think we would like them, honestly. Like, it almost sounds like it's kind of up the alley what you're talking about. Not to the quite of the level of yearning that you want, but closer.
Yeah.
We should give them a try someday. At least one.
I think that we need to deepen our characters. I think we need to make them more complex.
Yes.
I think that's what we need. And I think with kind of just like the young adult themes of the day, that could really fit in. Like we have these really deep, beautiful YA novels. And I'm not saying that like this Nancy Drew series would need to be that. But I think there's definitely room there to kind of to make these characters more real and more complicated and more layered than they ever have been. I think that could be a great market.
I like that.
So anyway.
Oh, that's so good.
Yeah. I had to read the heck out of them.
There is a lot of potential for the future of this franchise. There really is. I think it's going to be a minute before we get another TV show or movie just because 2019 was so recent. But, another 10 years, I think we could easily see another TV show or a movie come up. Yeah. And hopefully it would be, like you said, a little bit more like personal, a little bit more going in, a little bit more in depth,
Yeah. Oh, God.
I know.
I'm so excited. You guys just go out and make cool stuff.
Yeah.
Keep doing y'all.
Yeah. Keep sending us your fanfic because I love it.
Oh, please. I need to read this one now.
It's really good.
Anyway.
But yeah, I think that was the history of Nancy Drew fans.
Yes.
Fan groups, at least.
5 out of 5 flashlights, Kori.
Oh, well, thank you. I had so much fun putting this together.
5 out of 5.
Yay.
Yeah, you put a lot of work into this. So thank you, Kori.
Oh, well,
Appreciate it. Yeah.
Not as much work as the previous ones, honestly. A lot of this is just like my own experience of being a fan. Yeah. At least for the two most recent, the Clue Crew and the Druids. I feel like I have been around enough that I know what's going on with these groups. It's the previous 3 that I had to do a little bit more research on because obviously we weren't alive yet. So,
yeah. Coulda, shoulda,
there it is. Yes, hope you guys enjoyed it. Hopefully I didn't describe a fan experience that is completely detached from reality and what really happened. But yeah.
And you know what? If we did, add us and let us know.
Yeah.
I'd love to hear
about your fan experience.
More about it. Exactly.
It's just so important. I mean, we've talked about this before, but Nancy Drew is not an island. Somebody has to love her and appreciate her enough to keep her going. And that's our jobs, obviously,
Yes.
So
yeah.
Hopefully she'll be around another 100 years just because people like us love her enough to appreciate her for so long. But,
Here.
Yeah.
Here. So. Okay.
Oh my gosh. Speaking of the files and our love for the files.
Oh, we're going back. Thank God. Oh,
finally.
I could read these all day. Honest to God, we could just have a Nancy Drew Files podcast and I would be so happy. But yes, so we are going back to the Nancy Drew Files. Our patrons right now are voting on which ones we should be covering. And next up, or I should say first up, is going to be case file number 18, Circle of Evil. I am already halfway through it. I am loving it so far. Nancy is investigating a crime ring at a country club. It's very interesting. It's very stereotypically rich girl behavior, Nancy Drew. Very fun. And I am sure we will have a lot of fun discussing it next time.
Yes.
So, yeah. I guess we'll see you then. Bye, regular Drews.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to Regular Nancy Drew. If you like this episode, make sure to rate, review, and subscribe.
Email us at regularnancydrew@gmail.com.
You can also visit our website, regularnancydrew.com, and also follow us on Instagram at regularnancydrew.
You can also support us on Patreon. Patrons at the $3 level vote on upcoming episode topics and get exclusive access to our Scoop Sesh series.
And all patrons receive early access to each episode as well as weekly bonus content.
And to all you regular Drews out there, thanks for listening.